a plan which is spread over 7 years to scale 7 peaks in 7 continents. Perhaps one thing which I can figure out of it, he may like to be, aspiring to become a brand ambassador of 7-Up. Well, one thing which is common between you and me, of course, is ultra. You do ultra marathons, and I take Kingfisher Ultra. Well, ladies and gentlemen, please invite Mr. Shayamal Vallabhjee on the stage.
So what do I do here? Super. Thank you very much for having me here. I don't normally do presentations, but after speaking to Dr. Contractor last night, and Mr. Venkat sent me an email about 9 o'clock in the night saying, so I've had to put something together. It's a pity my good friend Milind is gone, He makes it sound very natural. Trust me, he's Googled a lot of articles to tell you what he has. I can guarantee that, And what we do is, as a sports scientist, that muscle that he keeps speaking about, the glute, that he says that's firing, one of us had to figure out which one of those muscles it was that needed to fire. So that's what we actually do. Okay. As a sports scientist, what I've done for the longest time is quantified parameters of success in sport. Okay. So what makes elite people fantastic? And that's what we try to do, is we try to push the boundaries, So when he wanted to run 1500, or when Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile, or when Milind Soman tried to run 1,500 kilometers and completed it, what we try to do is we quantify parameters that made that successful, so that the next time somebody wants to do it, right, we know what parameters they need to train. We know what prevents injury. We know what is the glute muscle that needs to be strong. And everything he said was absolutely spot on, And it's amazing. You'll see as I speak, there's a few points that if everyone was here, a few points that he said are reiterated in this through a scientific manner in some sort of way. So this is what I'm going to talk about after last night's email. I'm going to explain a little bit about biomechanics and its role in injury prevention. I've been told to speak about injury prevention, and I'll try to throw in a bit around my stories and stuff like that. Okay, so the very, very first thing is, let's start off. I said, this is a wonderful photograph, and I showed this photograph to a few people, right, including the surgeon. Everyone knows probably Dr. Joshi, Anand Joshi. And if you look at this person, take away the Kenyan thing on their running vest, right? If you look at those biomechanics, if you look at the excessive pronation and the valgus angle there, you would think that this person wouldn't be able to run for too long. Okay, and you'd be right. If those mechanics were there, right, they would pretty much break down. After a year, 2, they'd break down. And that's what science has taught us. Okay, but this person here, her name is Rita Jepto. Rita Jepto won last year's Boston and Chicago marathons. Okay, and she won it in about, I think, 2:19. 2 hours 19 minutes or something like that. Okay, and she won her first marathon in 2004, which was a Stockholm marathon. Okay, Rita Jepto is born in Kenya, in the town of Eldoret. And from her first marathon to 2013, she's been running with the exact same biomechanics and the exact same gait for pretty much 10 years and has had no injuries. Nothing to speak of. Okay, now what is it? Now, these are the things that bring me into the picture. Okay, what is it that they're actually doing right or wrong, or what is it that makes them elite? Okay, so as a sports scientist, my job is pretty interesting, because when somebody does something good, I rock up on the scene to see what happens and why are they so good and what have they actually done. And we try to test every single parameter so that Milind and everyone else can go to Google and find out what it was. Okay, someone had to write those articles. Okay, all right, super stuff. Okay, so just before we go into it, a few terminologies will get going. First one is biomechanics. Biomechanics is the science of movement. Okay, we study how the body moves. What we're looking at is the body has extrinsic and intrinsic forces. So in running, we're looking more at the intrinsic forces, which is the muscles, your tendons, your muscles, all of those things that are playing on the body. When we bring in racket sports into play, we have extrinsic forces. So we look in golf, we look at lever length, we look at club weight, things like that. They all play a role in the biomechanics of your body. Okay, that's what it is. Sports science, as I've said, is the discipline that quantifies parameters of success. It's what we test. It's things like VO2 max, things like muscle endurance, lactic acid, all these parameters. We test them and we quantify them. And we'll go into that a little bit detail. And physiotherapy is obviously, everyone's probably seeing a physio at some stage, is the treatment of musculoskeletal injuries and diseases through non-surgical means. So you're getting all your soft tissue and stuff like that. And the truth is that I think from an injury prevention standpoint, if somebody understands all three of these, right, we have a game changer. Right, you'll be injury-free and you'll be hitting peak performance and all sorts of things. Okay, so let's go into something a little interesting. Okay. So this picture, a few years ago, some people know this, a few years ago, I was involved in doing some research in Kenya. Okay, we piloted some research through the University of Cape Town with Professor Tim Noakes, and we went into this little village called Eldoret in Kenya. Okay, it's in the Rift Valley there. And this is a lovely little photograph. Before I even explain anything, this is what a basic training day looks like in Eldoret. In this photograph here, we have 4 people who have won international marathons. Okay, 4 of them, and we have 1 runner who's just pretty much starting off. Okay, and actually that's the reason behind their success, is that the guy who's just starting off is running with the person who's just won a marathon. So if he runs with him long enough and he sticks with him, he's got a pretty good chance of winning some international marathon somewhere. Okay, so socioeconomics plays a very, very big part in their success. Okay, but what did we find out there? Just interestingly, that 84 of the top 100 times in Kenyan marathon running, or in marathon, sorry, is recorded by East African runners coming out of Kenya, or in these African states. Firstly, the other thing is that when they start off training, they start off extremely slow. You know, Kenyans don't run. On the first day of training, they walk. You know, they put their shoes on and they go for a very, very long walk. 4 hours, 5 hours, they keep their bottles with them and they walk because they believe if your body can withstand that endurance for a longer period of time, then we can make it stronger. If you can't withstand that endurance, we can't make it stronger. You know, running a 40-minute 10K is not going to guarantee that you're going to finish a marathon. Very important, right? So what they're trying to do is they know that I need to spend so much time on my feet, so this is what they train for. They train for spending that amount of time. And once they can do that, then they look at how we can better that. Okay? So starting slow is a very, very important thing. And I'm going to link all of this in a little bit later. Okay. The next thing we found in some research that came out of there, and this our research was back in 2002, and it was the foundation for a lot of other research that's come. The University of Cape Town pretty much pilots research on Kenyan marathon runners with Professor Tim Noakes, and there's a new guy called Ross Tucker, who's a biokineticist that graduated a few years ago, and he's piloting a lot. And the other thing they found is that Achilles tendons are longer in Kenyan marathon runners. Okay, very, very important thing. So I'm busy doing that right now, where I've got a sample size of about 45 Mumbai marathon guys who are running. Some people are running 3 hours, some are running 4.5 hours. We've quantified their various training times. We've measured their Achilles tendons, and tomorrow's a big day for me to see whether it is actually a performance predictor, because I believe it can predict performance, Achilles tendon length. Okay. Next thing we noticed is that Kenyan marathon runners have greater calf elasticity. Calf elasticity means that the foot is going to get off the ground quicker. Okay. Elasticity means if something's more elastic, it can explode more. So if you have greater calf elasticity, your foot will get off the ground quicker. And then physics will tell you if something gets off the ground quicker, it's faster. Okay. So that links it up there. Okay. Another interesting thing, and this is the point I'm going to elaborate on a little bit further, is that the glute med and the psoas muscle. So glute med muscle is the glute muscle that Milind was speaking about. It needs to fire, but it can't fire in isolation. The one thing he forgot is, he did mention actually core. He said strong core? Yeah, so that's a psoas. So glute med and psoas. And the reason you need both is because they hold the pelvis in stable position. That's it. If either one is strong, or if that balance is not optimum, then what you'll do is you'll get what we call sacral torsion, or your pelvis will rotate. If your pelvis rotates, you're going to increase. All your running-related injuries come from that. Okay. One interesting thing we found there is that obviously they run in a rift valley. Okay, and a rift valley has softer ground. It's softer than tar. It's softer than concrete. It's softer than most surfaces. It's just sand. It's like silt. And running in that, there's a lot of shock absorption that happens just coming from that ground there. So that is one reason as well, that those longer runs, they're not getting those impact forces coming out of there. And then the last point, which is of very interesting, is that no matter who you are, one run minimum in the week has to be done barefoot if you're in Kenya. And that is a training adaptation. That's what makes their feet stronger. And it's possible for them to do that because they're running in the Rift Valley. Okay? So what they try to do is they use barefoot running as a training adaptation. Okay? Milind mentioned, whatever he mentioned was very, very true, in the sense that people are running barefoot, you will get faster. It's true. If you take off your shoes, your running gait will change from a heel foot striker to a midfoot or forefoot striker. You will run faster. But in Kenya, or take the first stat, 84 of the top 100 runners in the world, or recorded times in the world, are by East Africans. In East Africa and Kenya, a family will average $1,000 a year. That's what they'd earn. Okay, so you get Nike and Puma coming along and paying them $250,000 to wear a shoe, and all of a sudden, we as scientists can't find somebody to run one of those marathons barefoot, because research budgets are a little smaller than that. Okay, super. Okay, so let's go on. Okay, we're back to Mumbai Marathon. Okay. So I run an institute called the HEAL Institute, which is a sports science and high performance center. And what I'm trying to do is quantify parameters of success and try to duplicate the science that I've learned across various codes, in tennis, in cricket, in golf, and running being one of them. So we're trying to, all this research that I've learned, I'm looking at how can I adapt it in here. So we've done a research study there, and we know that the common injuries that we are finding right now are, these are the basic running injuries: your ITB friction syndrome, your patellar tendonitis, and Achilles tendonitis, shin splints, hamstring strains. These are common ones, okay? So we've assessed over 200 runners at the HEAL Institute in the past 2 months. And we found that over 90% of the runners have what we call that glute-med or weak cause. Right? Over 90% of them. That is exactly what Milind was saying, is that, you need that muscle fire and you need this to be strong. We are finding that 90% of runners don't have that. Okay, we're finding 77% of injuries have been attributed to overtraining and insufficient rest. Okay, now Daniel will come on and he'll explain about this. The overtraining doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing too much mileage. Okay, there's a fantastic phenomenon that's happening here. Anywhere else around the world, when we look at overtraining, we're looking at people doing excessive mileage. Here, it's not that. Here, they're doing all their mileage in too short a period of time. So they don't want to work Monday to Friday. They're trying to put in all their work on Saturday and Sunday. So that's where we're getting that overtraining symptom coming in, yeah. Okay. So what we took is out of there is that people and they're not getting enough rest after that. The rest is obviously they're putting in a 60% run on Sunday and the other 40 on a Friday and Saturday. There's no rest going. So that's what's leading to all those compound injuries. Okay. Super. And 5%, yeah, 5% of runners do no resistance training. So there's absolutely no fast twitch fibers coming. That's a small stat. Okay, so before I link everything together, I've tried to keep it very short. So there was a guy a long time ago called Pareto. Pareto was an economist, Wilfredo Pareto. Anyone heard of him? Yeah? Yeah. Super. So Pareto's law is the 80-20 rule, and he studied peas in a pod, which is why I have that photograph there. What he found is that 20% of the pods had 80% of the peas, and that's how he came up with his law of efficiency on the 80-20 rule. And he linked that to so many things. 20% of the people in the world control 80% of the economy. 20% of the people in your company are responsible for 80% of the productivity, and 20% of our muscles are responsible for 80% of the injuries you're getting, okay, which is where we're going to bring it in with glute med and psoas. Literally, those two muscles are responsible for actually more than 80% of those injuries that I've just mentioned in there. Okay. So, how do we apply what we've learned to science? Okay, I'm going through it very quickly so we can talk a little bit more. Okay, firstly, everyone, the old treatment plan, every time you get an injury, what they tell you is to rest, ice, compress, and elevate it. Okay, and in India, we take rest to a whole new level, Yeah, anything that's paying rest, just out of, when a sports scientist or a physio or a doctor says rest, he means rest the injured area, don't rest the whole body. you know. So if your hand is sore, just, you don't have to not do anything. If the foot is sore, you can still go, you know, rest the injured area. So, but we take that to a whole new level. But anyway, the new principle that we use, as biomechanicists, the body is used to movement. Movement's the most important thing, you know. We're born to move, you know. Millen said that, Doug said that in Born to Run as well, Tread Lightly, the books. Everyone says that we're born to. So if we are born to move, surely if something is wrong, we should try to get movement into place. You know, when you go to a physio, everything is stuck, we're trying to move it. Okay, so what we've done is recently worked with the whole team of physios, and we derived this nice little principle called the MEAT principle. And MEAT stands for movement, exercise, analgesics, and treatment. Movement is basically movement, moving that area. Exercising is strengthening that area, that specific area, and start strengthening it from day one. Okay. Analgesics is painkillers. If you need a little bit of a painkiller to suppress pain, sometimes we need that because pain is a limitation for movement. So if you can suppress pain, you can move it, it'll get stronger. The stronger a muscle is, then you can lift up its pain threshold and you'll bypass that. And treatment are your physiotherapy modalities, your massage. Massage is a very important thing, manipulations, mobilizations. So that's what we use, the MEAT principle. Okay, it's the key to everything. Then let's bring in Pareto's law. So if you can strengthen, just to give you very quickly, if there's one thing you need to take out of this entire talk that I've said and all this nonsense, it's just you need to strengthen your glute med and you need to strengthen your psoas muscle. Because this is what happens. The mechanics of it is very simple. You have your pelvis that sits there. Okay. If the glute is weak and the abs are strong, then what happens is the pelvis rotates like that because your abs are pulling it up. The psoas muscle is your lower abdominal muscle. It pulls it up. Okay. If the glute is excessively strong and hyperactive and your core is weak, it'll happen the other way. Okay. So we're going to get posterior and anterior tilt of the pelvis. Now what happens is very simply when your femur bone, you just watch this, it's supposed to glide up into that iliac crest. Right. So the iliac crest is a ball and socket joint, and the femur is the thigh bone that sits in it. So when we are running or when we are walking, there's some sort of give in that. There's some sort of now when you rotate that, when you rotate it right there, it's jarred. It gets locked. So what happens is the tension increases on the joint, on your ankle, increases on your knee, which produces all these running-related injuries. Okay. The second thing is that these muscles, everything in the body works on relationships. Everything. Muscles work on relationships. There's a direct relationship between this muscle, the glute muscle, and the IT band. Okay. And for everyone who has ITB friction syndrome, you have any patella tendonitis, you have quadricep tendonitis, any of these injuries is coming from the fact that the glute is too weak. Okay. So literally the only takeaway point you got from here is literally strengthen glute med, strengthen the lower core, and you could reduce 80% of your running injuries. The one other thing is, okay, I try to use the Nordic hamstring program, which is an eccentric hamstring program. Eccentric is the hamstring is generally a stabilizing muscle, so we should strengthen it in a stabilizing way. That's all I'm saying. And the best thing is, you know, the easiest exercise to do it is pick an incline and walk backwards uphill. Like, so you're just walking backwards uphill, you know, and that's an eccentric hamstring strengthening and glute exercise. Okay. And the last thing we learned there, this is an interesting one. So we found that the Kenyans run one run a week is barefoot. Okay. And we looked at that as a training adaptation. So what we brought that down is we found, now there's research that shows that if you use 2 different pairs or 3 pairs of running shoes in a week, if you alternate your running shoes, you reduce your risk of running related injuries by 39%. Okay, and that's because the tissue loading is different. So every time you use a different pair of shoe, the stress on your foot at various parts is totally different. Okay, and because of that, you're going to, and how that comes into barefoot running is that when you're running barefoot, right, the pressure points are triggered at various areas. So it's exactly the same thing, but when you're wearing a shoe, your stresses are exactly in the same areas. Okay, so that's a lovely little training adaptation that you can bring into play there. Okay, and yeah, if you follow all of this, less injuries and you'll run faster, that's for sure. Okay, any questions?
Hi, my name is Kavin. You just mentioned, actually have 2 questions.
Sure.
First is, you said that they have 1 day of barefoot training.
Minimum.
So what's the distance?
The distance, what we say is they do 60%. If they are running in shoes, 60% of your mileage is done in a specific shoe, and your training adaptations come in over the other 40% of your mileage. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Hmm. Yeah. 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 Yeah, like, I think, did you hear Milan speak? You did, yeah. It's exactly what he said, it's a training adaptation. Your body needs to adjust to it. So what you got to do is you can't go from using a well-supported shoe to barefoot. You can't even go from a well-supported shoe to a sock. You need to go to a minimal runner, so your mobiums or your frees are very minimal, and from that you can get into your vibrams. From that you got to get, and even when you move on to barefoot, you can't just throw the shoes away. You got to do like 2 runs a week in your shoes, 1 run barefoot, and then that's how you got to keep switching it back and forth. It will definitely. Sorry, you want to switch the other way? You want to go from barefoot to shoes? Yeah. Yes, it will. It will get you. It'll definitely help you to get stronger. But like I said, everyone should have their one pair that they're gonna run in. One pair that's 60% of your mileage. You can't vary that. You can't vary that. Your long runs you're going to do in one and use it. They call training adaptations. It's much like Daniel will elaborate on this. Like it's like hill running, like fartlek training, like interval training. These are called training adaptations, which are used to bring up elasticity, fast twitch fibers, muscle contraction, increase VO2 max. These are things. In a nutshell, what happens is the more you take the body out the comfort zone, right, the more it will respond to it. Right, the more you shock the system, the more it will respond to it. That's anything you do in a nutshell. Yes. Aggravates an injury. Yes. Yeah, 100%. There are few things. Firstly, if you have an injury and you don't get it seen to, anything you do will aggravate it. Okay. The next thing is, we have to train according to the environment that we're in. A lot of people don't actually have rift valleys to run in. A lot of people don't have tracks to run in. A lot of people just have the road. I've always only run on the road. Only when I've come, I actually don't even go to race course. I can only run on the road. And but there are few precautions that you make. Like for example, there was a time when I had a group of runners that were coming from PDP, and everyone was leg length. Everyone had sacral torsion of about 1 inch, right, on the same side. And only when I noticed, I realized that everyone who runs there, right, they run in the same direction, and they never ever alternate the direction. So you're getting one foot is loading more than the other, as you're turning on the instep. So that's going to produce sacral torsion as well. Yeah. Anything? Okay, thank you.